Man like Mark Sullivan, the warrior self. Stay tuned for the thrilling episode. Woo!
A positive mental attitude can clear away all obstacles which stand between you and your major purpose in life.
This is the Snowboard Project featuring Mark Sullivan and the Bead. The Snowboard Project. The Snowboard Project. The Snowboard Project.
Welcome back to the Snowboard Project. I'm Mark Sullivan.
And I am the Beeve, and shoot dang if it isn't Pat Schutte.
That's right. Today we have Pat Schutte, and that is not a name you've probably heard. And yet, he is a guy who is really interesting and has actually really deep roots in the sport.
All right, so I've never heard of Pat Schutte. Tell me about his deep roots and why you... Yeah.
Okay, so Pat got his start in the late 1970s in Michigan, and I think he built like a little track in his backyard. Could have been the world's first border cross track. Okay. Who knows, right? That they were riding on a hillside, basically, kind of golf course style,
sure,
as was the way back then. And he just really fell in love with snowboarding, and he was also a skateboarder, skated pools in the concrete pool era in the 70s.
No way.
And but then he went to school and he went on to become the PR director for all of Supercross and Motocross, like the outdoor nationals, the AMA Motocross, the AMA Supercross, and he's done that for, I gotta say, at least 15 years, probably more like 30 years. I'm sure he says it in the interview. I don't remember now. But anyhow, he is really at the top of the game with PR, and he gives just some amazing advice. Tell us some stories about the old snowboarding days.
Gotcha.
But he gives us some great advice as well on PR and just being a professional and maintaining doing something that you love.
Now, let me ask you this. It seems like we've drifted away into motocross and supercross here. Why is this relevant as a snowboarder to listen to this guy who was a snowboarder and he's now
first of all, he still is a snowboarder. Yeah, he's still a snowboarder. He's still passionate about it. He rides a race board today. And, like, who am I to call him out? He still has a passion about it. He has, like, literally, he's had to, like, keep and cobble together his hard boots, basically, because they don't make them anymore, right?
Yeah.
And so, it's hard to get racing equipment, but he still loves snowboarding. And, he likes that G-forces that you get turning, basically.
Okay.
And he's in his 50s now, I want to say. And so he's like a little bit older. But, the thing is, it's like, it's amazing where snowboarding can take you, where that inspiration of being involved with board sports, where that can take you in life, right? And so I think Pat is a great example of someone who discovered their passion and then was able to translate that into a career. And granted, it wasn't a career in snowboarding, but it was a career in doing something he was passionate about.
All right. Well, should we roll into this?
Yeah, let's listen to Pat Schutte. This is episode number
24.
Pat Schutte.
This is Pat.
Pat, Mark Sullivan calling.
Mark Sullivan.
How are you?
Tailgate, Alaska, buddy.
I know, that's right. I'm kind of retired from tailgate now, actually.
I saw that.
Yeah.
I saw that. A great... I remember when you first told me you had that idea. I think you're at least a year out from it yet. And I'm like, oh, man, that rules. So
it's been a lot of fun, and if you get some time, check out powexplorer.com. I was able to get a piece of land up there and build my dream house, which is a cabin. And so now I can, entertain people up there, and tailgate's still going. It's just I'm not taking on the day-to-day responsibility of it,
What was that website again?
POW Explorer, P-O-W Explorer.
Got it.
So, all right, let's jump into this thing.
Right on.
Today I'm joined by Pat Schutte, probably a name you're not familiar with, but I don't know, Pat, maybe you can fill us in a little bit about your resume, and then we'll get into your snowboarding and skateboarding past a little bit and how that's kind of all come full circle or contributes to the bigger picture.
Yeah, probably the last, I'm going to say 15 to 18 years I've been involved in kind of the publicity side of things. But prior to that, I cut my teeth as a newspaper reporter, and rolled out of college with a journalism degree, and all set to be the next Woodward and Bernstein type character. And things took a couple turns, and ended up doing more features and sports writing, and then kind of transitioned from there into a role with a then company called Pace Motorsports, and I was the director of PR for the AMA Supercross series. And once I got going on that, it was kind of interesting, the tie-in with other action sports and the people that were interested in dirt bikes that came from a wide variety of things we do for thrills. Obviously Sean Palmer's a pretty with snowboarding is a pretty obvious one, but other guys that I found out, like Steve Caballero, the skater, and Darren Rawls from the U.S. ski team, and Sonny Garcia, the surfer. There was just this litany of athletes from action sports that were just absolutely down with dirt bike racing, and arguably, the kind of the pinnacle of those sports is professional motocross. I mean, it's a tough as nails sport. There's no margin for error, as with many progressing action sports the same way. But this is gas and gravity, and dirt bikes is just a recipe for amazement, really. And so these guys really were drawn to it, and so I was able to put on some we called them crossover races at the time. That was kind of a hot term, and so they were athletes would cross over from their given sport and come in and race places like the Anaheim Supercross was the first one I did, and then we did them all over the West Coast, from Washougal up in Washington down to Hangtown in NorCal, Sacramento, and Glen Helen in the Los Angeles area. So that's really how I was able to kind of parlay my love and enjoyment for the sports of skateboarding and snowboarding and skiing and into my profession at the time, which was promoting professional dirt bike races.
So here's kind of a side question: is like, you said the first race was at a Supercross at Anaheim Supercross. Were any of these crossover athletes actually able to ride the whole track as it ought to be ridden, hitting all the triples and doubles?
No, not really. And too, I need to there's a little caveat to this. Rob Morrow actually did this first, and he had an event. It was a bit more low key compared to what I was able to deliver. But he kind of came up with the idea first of putting pro snowboarders and athletes from other areas onto dirt bikes and letting them have at it. So I'd seen that in one of the old snowboard magazines. I don't know if it was ISM or whichever one it was, and that thought was kind of in my head. And when I got to the area that I did, then I was able to kind of recreate and expand upon what he had done prior to me. But no, a Supercross course it's very, very technical. It would be like taking a motocross racer that can get down the hill on a snowboard and putting them in a World Cup, Olympic snowcross or terrain park type situation. Yeah. With the rails and such. So there's literally no way. A couple guys could double. There was a couple guys. And Sean Palmer is the anomaly. He if he had some time to practice it, I think he would have been able to wire it. But outside of him, nobody was close. I mean, Tex Davenport broke his wrist. We had Tommy Bonacci, who was a jet ski racer, wadded himself up pretty good. But outside of that, we never had any big time injuries, and especially when we took it out of the stadiums and took it to the the pro national motocross tracks, Glen Helen, Hangtown, Washougal. There was really I can't recall any kind of injuries. Everybody was able to kind of ride at their own pace, and some rode faster than others. And a funny side story on that, I had Phil and Steve Mayer at Washougal, and Steve Mayer had ridden a couple of our events, and he talked Phil into doing it. And Phil was former Olympic gold medalist in slalom at Sarajevo, and so he came out, and I set him up with a real nice bike. He didn't have a bike, and I was standing next to him on the start line, and I was like, "Hey, you ready to go?" And he's like, he goes, "I'll be honest with you, Phil, let's see." And he goes, I haven't ridden in a while. And I'm like, "Oh, well, you look like you're in good shape." And he goes, "I haven't ridden in 8 or 10 years." So he proceeded to go out on a factory race bike, Yamaha, that I'd set up at YZ. That was Ryan Huffman's, who was the son of the owner there. And Phil, he made it through about 2 or 3 turns, and then he just cartwheeled. And it's kind of like you threw a G.I. Joe by the foot down a hill, where his arms and legs spread out and just, north, south, east, west, north, south, east, west. And he landed on some hay bales and then just kind of sat out the rest of the race there, watching the other guys go by. So that was a pretty wild story. But, yeah, so Phil's, he was just, having him as part of it, and some of the other, those pinnacle athletes, was just incredible for the sport of motocross.
And it was incredible for the athletes who participated. I witnessed at least a couple of those races firsthand, and I tell you what, like the joy that those guys felt being able to be a part of like an outdoor national race was incredible. Those guys really did appreciate your appreciation for what they were doing, because they were fans of the sport, Well,
that's it too. And one time in particular, we had we were at Hangtown, and this was when during the kind of the 4-stroke takeover of the sport. So Ricky Carmichael was still running the table on a Honda CR 250, and Kevin Windham was the only guy that was able to break up his win streak, and he did it on a CRF 450, and that's when you can still race both of them, but it's all 4 strokes now. So I had, everybody was out there, including like Ken Block from, the skateboard world, from DC Shoes, and Palm was out there, and Jim Rippey, and the Roach brothers, and a bunch of pro skaters and everything. And I had them out, we had the track to ourselves on a Thursday for press day. And so those guys were out riding, and I sent Ricky Carmichael and Kevin Windham out on the track with them. So you can only imagine what happened. I mean, and then I prepped, Windham and Carmichael on everything in advance, and they were just jumping over guys' heads at every chance they could, just out of corners, downhill jumps, that massive uphill gully double that they have. Yep. I mean, Carmichael jumped over Steve Caballero's head, and Cab had to pull off. He was so blown away, and came in. He's like, that's the greatest thing that's ever happened to me.
Right. I got stuffed by Ricky Carmichael. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah. And this is Steve Caballero saying that, arguably one of the longest running skateboard greats in history. So yeah, we had a ton of fun with that, bringing in guys from the sport, and I think the pro motocross racers really appreciated it too, because they'd end up. Carmichael ended up one time at the ESPY Awards, and he sat next to Bob Burnquist, and so he had already known, through Cab and some of the other guys, that were participating in these events, a little bit more about skateboarding, and have followed it a little bit more. He never had in the past, so he was all excited when he came back and said, I got to sit next to Bob Burnquist at the ESPYs. Ricky Carmichael saying that. So.
Yeah, and Bob Burnquist is like, I got to sit next to Ricky Carmichael at the ESPYs, right?
Yeah, isn't that funny?
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. So let's rewind back to how you first got involved with skateboarding and snowboarding. When did you first get involved with those sports?
I was, I think it was 1971 when I first got on the skateboard, and I was kind of pilfering through my neighbor's garage. He was an older kid, and he had just all kinds of cool stuff in there. I'm like, hey, check this out, and it was one of those. It had a shark on it, and it had clay wheels, and so I went out on it and just proceeded to just wad up left and right, and I think at one point I put carpet on it for grip tape, and I had no clue, right, as to what I was doing, and then we found another one that had steel wheels, and so me and a buddy had never seen the magazine, never seen anything about it. We figured out how to catamaran. so we started doing that. We were sitting on them a little bit more, and then I was at like a department store or something with my dad, and I got a Grentech spoiler which had urethane wheels as a plastic board, and I thought that was the greatest thing ever, right? So I started riding that, and then it just it took off from there. I mean, by the late 70s, I was heavily skating vert, and won the biggest pool freestyle contest they ever had in the Midwest, and with some of the judges of it were Tony Alva and Bert Lamar from progressed into snowboarding, Brad Bowman and Fred Blood, the roller skater. So that was a really cool tour that came through, and that was kind of the highlight of my career. It was kind of downhill after that. The following summer, I got a YZ80, and I used to ride it in the swimming pool instead of my skateboard. So, but during that time, the connection to that we had in the Midwest to the world of snowboarding was through Skateboarder magazine, and then Action Now, and so I had one of the very first Sims Lonnie Toft decks, the pressed plastic board with the skateboard deck Toft snub nose mounted onto it, with the garbage can straps for bindings, and those to this day, in deep snow, those things are still just the best to ride, man. And so we got those. So I really started snowboarding, and I think like the summer or the winter of '79. And,
wow.
Rode those heavily. In fact, there's I shot a photo of a buddy of mine doing an invert, off a little like quarter pipe thing that we made, and Action Now ran it, and we had a snake run that we'd built up in the hills behind one of our neighborhoods, and this predated anything Baker, anything like that by a long shot, and we guys would come all from all over the Detroit area, that skated with us in the summer on their snowboards, and we'd session this. Chris Yandel was there, the famous GNS skater from back in the day, and the Yandel bull rolls, and he had moved to Michigan for a computer job, and he was kind of our leader, and so we sessioned heavily what was vert at the time on our snowboards, with things we made, and really progressed with that heavily. And then after a while, I went away to college for a while and kind of bailed on the sport for a few years, and then during that time, I think the SnowTech Pulsar came out, and it was one of the early P-Tex, metal edge boards, and I picked up one of those, and been, riding pretty heavily ever since. So,
nice.
Yeah.
Hey, what's up, guys? Beef here. I know you're probably kicking back in your room with your headphones on, or maybe you're in your car on the way to work, or maybe coming from work, and I just want to say thank you for tuning in and listening. It is people like you that make this worth it for guys like Mark and I to make these episodes for you. Please do us a favor. Will you please rate us, share us, tell your friends, spread the word. We want to be able to keep making this happen. And if you can also go to patreon.com/the Snowboard Project, you can check us out and you can help us keep creating these podcasts for you. We are an independent voice in snowboard media, meaning we don't have anybody that we are beholden to. We don't have anybody that says, hey, maybe you shouldn't talk about that, and that is why this is special. So thank you for being a supporter of that. If you feel like supporting us, or if you don't, hey, either way, at least you're tuning in. So please share, please like, please rate, please let us know how we can be better. Patreon.com/the Snowboard Project.
So you basically started like at the beginning of the sport, and yet you were able to find a career in something that people are definitely passionate about, but it wasn't actually in winter sports. How did you decide to like kind of go that route versus being involved with like say the skateboard or snowboard industry?
Yeah, I'd never, I was basically going to be a journalist, really, and I didn't. I wish I could say that. Well, I saw the writing on the wall with the internet going the way it is, and newspapers kind of going backwards, and promotions and event marketing going forwards, but I didn't. I had a buddy call me and said, "Hey, I just saw they're advertising a job for superbikes. You ride dirt or Supercross. You ride dirt bikes, don't you? And I answered the ad, and it was in Chicago, so I just ripped over there and from Detroit, and it's funny. I went to this interview, and I think I had like a NASCAR T-shirt on and jeans, and thinking it's some kind of hayseed operation. When it turns out this company's Feld now, Feld Motorsports, and I mean it's a big time operation. So they kind of laughed it off and then called me back for another interview, and I ended up getting a job, and it was it was just I hadn't really planned to do anything. I didn't even know you could make money with the skateboard or snowboard industry. I just thought they're pretty much for fun, and it's what I like to do on the side. But being from the Midwest, you're kind of car oriented, motorsports oriented, and I always had a hand in that when I was growing up a little bit. So it was pretty easy transition for me to make out of what I was doing into what they wanted, which was basically just putting butts in seats with promotion, and everything kind of it took off from there. And then I also did quite a bit of stuff with the monster truck sport in the series, and that was getting off, and on the racing side of it. And monster trucks did a lot to advance the enhancements of the Supercross show that fans are pretty aware of. A lot of that early on enhancements came from was funded by monster trucks. So it's kind of funny the two had this kind of this parallel kind of serendipitous relationship, and that nobody really knew about, but I was right there at the helm of it and having a blast with it.
Were you bringing out like the Bigfoot out to like Supercross races and having it run around the track?
Yeah, they can't run on a Supercross track. I mean, they could crawl over it. And now remember this was 96, 97, 98, to the 2000s when I was with the Supercross series. So we'd bring them out in the parking lot and have them park them up and have them crush some cars. And it was a time too when Bigfoot and Gravedigger kind of took separate leads in the sports, and I was with the promotion company that handled all the big stadium events, where Bigfoot was kind of a support cast to that, or kind of around. Gravedigger was the one truck that really took the sport to the heights. Bigfoot put it on the map, and then the Gravedigger took it off from there. But anyway, we did a lot of fun crossovers, cross promotion stuff also too with the monster trucks. They were always around. They were always in the background. A lot of people kind of poo-pooed them a little bit, and that's kind of like whatever. And yet when you see them in person, you see one run, you can't help but be pretty impressed by it.
Have you ever driven one? Have you ever actually gotten behind the wheel of a monster truck?
Yeah, I haven't jumped in or anything, but I have. I've got to put my foot into it a little bit, and it's pretty wild. Those are big, blown, basically like a blown up NASCAR motor, and they put out a lot of power. And it's funny because they wheelie in a sense with all four wheels on the ground, and so the floorboards are plexiglass. So when the front end rises up, you look through the floorboards to see where you're going.
Oh, that's pretty interesting. I never really thought about that. But this whole time you've been snowboarding, right? You were snowboarding kind of in the wintertime when you weren't going to Supercross races.
Yeah, and it was fun too because there's some races like Utah in particular. I'd stoke out the guys at SNOWBOARD and their marketing department with tickets and stuff, and have those guys down in the press box and whatever, and then I'd spend a couple extra days out there and get to ride snowbird. And so I've snowboarded all along. I mean, that's the one thing. I think that's a sport that I kind of really enjoy the most, and it's funny too. I ride more now. I started out riding heavily freestyle oriented stuff, and I got into the hard boots racing, where you kind of cross between the, your soft stuff and the hard boots, and I never quite escaped that feeling of hard boots and being able to carve turns. So once my body got to the point where I really couldn't jump like I used to, and or I could, but the end result could be tragic.
Yeah.
So but I still like to go fast, and there's something about just charging a jacket flap or a groomed run and on a race board that I never was able to get rid of. And there's kind of a cult of us out there that the guys that still ride hard boots, we're all kind of white hair and that, and a little chubby and whatever. But there's going fast, and just making surgical turns with your chin just off the ground. That's one thing about snowboarding that I really still get a rush out of. And now I got a little guy that's I got him skiing to start out, and we're about to make the transition over to snowboards, and so that's going to be fun seeing him do it too. But I still love to get out and make turns.
So where do you get hard boot equipment from? Because it's not actually really available in the U.S. so much anymore.
Yeah, I'm sitting on some stuff that is pretty much shot, but I can still ride it, right? I think the boots that I have, the Nordica SBHs, were designated as ice climbing boots,
okay.
And they've got a rubber, almost like a Vibram sole on them, and I've got two pair of them. Andy Hare with Nordica was who kills it on a dirt bike and a road racing bike for that matter. He found me a pair at Nordica when he was coming out and to the races with me, the motocross, supercross races. So I got a brand new pair that I'm sitting on, and my other ones I broke them in half, which was kind of a freakish feeling at speed in breaking a hard boot, and I didn't fall, but it just literally just snapped the boot. So a buddy of mine works in the carbon fiber industry, and so I took it to him, and he wrapped it in Kevlar and put it in an autoclave, and the things held together, man. They're literally, these boots are from '92. That was when I first started riding in them.
Wow.
And I still have them, and I put all different kinds of shims and bolts, and I've just got them so Frankenstein out that they're comical to look at, but I can still turn them.
Yep. Well, if you do need to get gear, I think you can mail order from Europe from Blue Tomato or something. And I think that they still make quite a bit of race gear for Europe. So just a little tip,
No, for sure. That's like saying, hey, we're big in Japan. The alpine riding's still going on over in Europe. I think that's great.
Yeah, and it still happens. I live in Sun Valley, and it still happens here. There's still some dedicated hard boot riders here. So it still happens, but yeah, they're few and far between. It's almost like you're more anti-establishment today to be a hard booter than you are to be a freestyle rider. With the advent of the X Games and the Olympics and everything. I
was on a chair at Breck once. Just quick story here. I first tracks got in the real early in the morning. Ski down. We were on Peak 8 or whatever. Came down from the condo. Was going to head up to the top and we pull a line. It's that big 6-place high-speed chair. So I'm in the middle somehow and get in there. And two kids are over to my left. And then a real older couple, like in their 70s, are to my right. And so this lady that's sitting next to me strikes up a conversation, and she goes, that's an interesting board. And I go, yeah, it's I explain, give her the spiel. It's an alpine board. It's made more for racing and high speed riding and turning, and the ones over here are more freestyle, pointing to the younger guys. And she goes, you look like a skier too, like the way you're dressed. And I go, yeah, well, it's just what I have to wear. And she goes, those boys over there, she goes, their clothes are so baggy. Why is that? And this kid sitting next to me leans over and looks at her and goes, it's so I can hide a gun. And he sits back, and I didn't know what to do, and I feel him jiggling, like he's laughing, his shoulders right against mine, and this lady was just aghast. She just sat back in her seat and moved closer to her husband. So I got this kid in a headlock and pulled him halfway off the chair. As we were, still going up the hill, I go, tell her you're lying, dude, tell her you're lying. He's like, I'm kidding, ma'am, I'm kidding. So.
Oh man, that was kind of the attitude back in the day, we're just snowboarders were just trying to hoist the flag on the pirate ship, at least as skiers.
Absolutely, yeah. I don't really see that much anymore. That's a whole another subject, but it's it seems like with with the twin tip skis and everybody kind of sharing the same terrain parks and that, it's just kind of it's smooth the edges out between the sports to me. I don't know.
Yeah, I'd say that's probably a fair assessment to make. I would say that there was a time when it was like kind of cats and dogs living together, and then it evolved into the point where it was like Chihuahuas and pit bulls living together or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Clearly.
Yeah. So, but anyhow, let's talk a little bit about how you do promotions and what's involved in that job. Like, what is like a typical day for you like when you're on the job?
Well, I just got back from a couple events. Just the Spring Creek motocross 2 weeks ago. This past weekend, the motocross series was. Lucas Oil Championship Series was up in Washougal, and so the two races prior to that, I had a lot of publicity for those. So Redbud, which is America's largest motocross race attendance-wise, and they'll be hosting the Motocross of Nations this coming October 6th and 7th. So it's like the Olympics of motocross will be at Redbud, and so basically everything starts out well enough in advance, and I think with what I do and people in general that have been doing this for a while, you have your go-to media people that I stay in touch with year round, and I'm always making a point, at least once a month or so, to kind of see what they've been writing or see what they've been editing for TV and that, and we'll reach out to them and make a comment, on something that I saw and good job they did on it and that. So really it's for the most part it's a year-round thing. And you just want to kind of stay in their ear and above and beyond that too. I've become friends with a lot of these guys and gals that do this, and so we do that, and likewise they'll reach out to me and, hey, I heard something about this, or I heard this racer was hurt. Is he going to be able to come to Redbud in 6 months? And we enjoyed meeting him last year, and so it's kind of a mutual type. Bonding over the sport of motocross, and so I create I don't know 10, a dozen, 15 press releases throughout the year for each of my clients. Talking anything about new sponsors or what's been happening with the property in terms of new buildings. What they've done to the track this year. Anything along those lines, and then we just kind of really start building the hype, and and if you know what you're doing, you've kind of been building it year round, and then you really wick it up, as you come in kind of a 30, 15, 5-day advance press release and press communication on it. And then there's also too, a social media element that you work to stay on top of, and but more what I do is kind of the mainstream press, the stick and ball type newspaper editors, and how I can place stories on on our racers in their paper, and everybody's fighting for copy inch space in there, and it's a pretty tough job. And motocross can be kind of a fringe sport when you compare it to like NASCAR and open wheel racing and things like that. So it's always an uphill battle at times, and yet it's rewarding when you get your story in there. And one thing I've done more recently too, probably in the last 3 to 5 years, is I've kind of empowered a lot of the racers and given them some more than others, tips on how to place a story. And then we open up our press day, which is usually the Thursday prior to the Saturday race, to these local pros that, hey, if you can score a story on yourself, you can come ride press day with Eli Tomac and Marvin Muskin, whoever's going to be there, right? So it's always a big thing for our local pros, and these are guys that if you went out to your local fairground track and watch them race, you would think they were the next Ricky Carmichael or Jeremy McGrath, and yet when they come to a pro national, when you have the world, the top guys in the world that are going to be racing there. A lot of them don't even stand a chance of making the 40-man gate to start the race. So they're getting through the qualifiers. So anyway, I empower these guys, and they've done an amazing job. Very resourceful group of dudes that place their own media, and doing that, and opening them up then to press day. They can built media contacts themselves and have stayed in touch in a lot of cases with the same reporter over the years, and so it's kind of grown like that, which certainly helps me a lot with a lot of the outlying papers, having them doing that job for me.
Right. How do you take a paper and give them or a news outlet, let's say, and give them an appreciation for the sport if they view it as kind of an outsider or a fringe thing? How do you get them to actually cover it in a substantial way?
Yeah, it's a good question. Some won't. Some flat out, guys that are very, can be curmudgeons regarding, it's baseball, football, and basketball, and that's kind of what we cover here. And and thanks for reaching out to us, but we're not interested. So you get some doors slammed on you like that. But I have to, I kind of tie it back to, things that like the X Games built, and the Hester series, and the everything to do with snowboarding becoming as popular as it has, and then the crossover to the video games, and Tony Hawk Pro Skater, and you look at all this movement and the youth movement, and if you want to expand your readership, and that's the goal of every editor, is to expand their readership. You're not going to do it by, catering to people who are dropping off. You're going to do it to people who are coming up. And a lot of these younger people, and rally racing is another one. If you look at motorsports, rally racing is hugely popular with youth. Sport hasn't caught on in the U.S. like it has been embraced in Europe, but through the video games and such, it's absolutely, I think, the pinnacle of interest, along with Supercross and Motocross, to younger people and younger potential readers of newspapers. So you kind of have to, you don't want to argue it. You just kind of have to lay it out for them, like, hey, listen, there's more to it than just this. And fortunately, during the summer months, the high school sports are out. Everybody's on break. So that gives us some more time to and more space to place the motocross stories. And with motocross, a lot of these guys, maybe not a lot, but a good portion of them, went to high school and wrestled or played football or played hockey, some contact sport, and so that's always a nice thing to have in your corner. So this kid played sports at Prairie Valley High School right down the street from you guys. Now he's a pro dirt bike racer. Why? How do you do that? And this is kind of an interesting story. So it's always a battle, and it's it's something that that not only I fight with dirt bike racing, but a buddy of mine works at PR in hydroplane, unlimited hydroplane racing. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you've ever seen those. Those things are badass, man.
Yeah.
I love seeing the Allison, helicopter jet engines, and just incredible. And he fights the same thing. Well, it's boat racing. What's that going to do to us? So namely, you got to localize the story for him, and then you got to kind of give him the white shoe on how cool it is.
Right, and so do you find that if they come to the race that they're actually more inclined to cover it, or are they kind of like, oh, these guys are just kind of out there doing this thing, and it is what I thought it would be, a fringe sport? No,
they're hooked. They're absolutely, unequivocally hooked if I can get them. The tough part is getting them, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
We're on the weekend. A lot of times, that's their time off or whatever. But if I can get a reporter to come out to the track, and I take them, by the hand and take them out to Larocco's Leap, say at Redbud, which is, a 140-foot, 3-story in the air jump that, that the best riders in the world do every lap. And they stand there and watch this. It is literally jaw-dropping. and they can't believe it. And I've won over, by like what you just said, having them at the race. I've won over the vast majority of media persons that have ever finally agreed to come to the event. You get them there, and they can be blown away, especially with the access we can give them.
Hey, Mark.
Yeah.
Would you say like growing things organically could be likened a lot to like growing things organically?
Yeah. Like, what do you got in mind? Like tomatoes?
Because we're trying to
Let's say,
grow
for
this.
instance, tomatoes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
so
like
tomatoes need sunlight. And
like
they
if you buy,
need
like, yes.
some water, and they need some soil.
Right. No, I have friends who would like, they would actually like buy these lights and they would grow tomatoes indoors organically.
Okay. So can we liken the lights and in our fake sunlight to Patreon
subscribers? Yes, exactly. Yeah. Like, yes, you will be our metal halide lights.
You too can be our grow lights. So why don't you help us grow? If you're interested in helping us grow, go to patreon.com/the Snowboard Project and help us grow to be a bigger independent voice in snowboarding. We want to bring you an organic experience that is grass fed and
grass fed.
I have no idea.
Okay.
All right.
Oh yeah, and by the way, also subscribe, rate, review on iTunes, on Google Podcasts, on any of our podcasting platforms. That's also going to help us grow, help get the word out, and also tell your friends. Right? If you enjoy the podcast, please tell your friends, let your snowboarding buddies know.
But also let your friends that like to grow tomatoes know too. Just saying.
Right. So is there like a relationship? Because you see the X Games, you see freestyle motocross, and then you see, someone do Larocco's leap. And it's like the same kind of jump, except they're doing it in a race course, trying to beat people to, around the track. What's the relationship between those two aspects of riding dirt bikes?
Well, freestyle is motocross is primarily made up of guys, and at one time that's all it was made up of guys who weren't able to make a living racing, pro motocross. They all, that was their dream. Their dream was to be the next Rick Johnson or Johnny O'Mara or Jeremy McGrath. And when Brian Deegan, the halcyon moment, when Brian Deegan ghost rode his bike at the LA Coliseum, in like '95, that kind of the moment where freestyle was born, so to speak. When that happened, and the guys that took it over, Kerry Hart and Mike Metzger, all those guys raced pro motocross. In fact, one of the first guys I ever met at Supercross was Mike Metzger. Him and his dad were in the room next to me at the hotel, and had some pizza with him. And hey, I'm the new PR guy, and hey, I'm Mike Metzger, and so that's what he was doing. He was racing. Now you get into Axel Hodges and some of the other guys, especially some of the European Thomas Pages, Pages. Those guys that are like the best at it right now. I don't know if they were inspired to race pro or not. Probably a little bit as a younger guy, but then they took the freestyle route and have taken the sport to just the heights that are just unbelievable. The difference between that is, it's both pay to play. I mean, if you sketch out in any area, racing or freestyle, the price you pay can be catastrophic. The difference hitting something like Larocco's or a big 90-foot backflip jump in the X Games is, remember, you have 40 of the other best guys in the world that want to get over that jump before you. You're coming out of turns leading up into it with deep ruts that your pegs are dragging on. You've got 2, 3, 4, sometimes a half a dozen bikes in the air with you, and in jeopardy, you're in jeopardy of having one of them land on you or bump you when you're in the air. So there's an element of racing and some of those jumps, and there's a lot of them on. Every course has their signature jump. Like the Sky Shot at Unadilla and Holy Schmidt at Millville, and the uphill double at Hangtown. That's 100 plus foot. So there's every track has one. A lot of them have two as well of those signature type jumps. So that's the difference in doing a jump like that and doing it, in freestyle and doing it during the pressure of a race and 100-degree heat, 30-minute moto. You're on the last two laps. You got to make it over that, or you're going to get passed. So there's a big difference between that and freestyle.
Right. It seems though that like probably freestyle and racing have kind of become so specialized that no one does both. Right. There is no Travis Pastrana that was kind of dabbling in freestyle and still kind of racing at like an outdoor national level before he went full freestyle.
Yeah. And even then too, the guys that dropped out. Travis he's such an anomaly. The guy is so talented that he could still go out and qualify for, I'm convinced of it, qualify for a national if he put his mind to it. But the guys that when Deegan and Hart and Kerry Hart, I did a ton of PR with him in Vegas. That was his home race, so he was like my go-to guy back in the late '90s. This is way prior, well, not way prior, but well in advance. He was still trying to go to the races in a pickup truck, privateer, trying to make it, and him and his dad, and so back then those guys were they could have dropped back out of freestyle and qualified, Deegan especially, for sure Metz. But now, I don't see any of the names. They did a little bit of speed and style at the X Games a number of years ago, and Nate Adams and that was kind of the end of it, I think. And now it's like you said, it's fully specialized, and you've got tricks now that the guys are doing that other guys had that trick and maybe one other, and now you've got guys that are pulling off everybody else's tricks and putting them in their quiver, and it's just I just saw a Red Bull video the other day of a fella on Pages on his practice track, and it was just, I could not believe it. Just so cool to watch.
Do any of the guys still do kind of, maybe not like backflips, but are they still doing, I know everyone whips on the bike. That's kind of maybe even to go faster, but are people doing tricks on motocross tracks during races or over the finish line jump or anything like that?
Yeah, the one that still prevails that I see is the heel clicker. You still see guys, and it's a number of different guys do it. And a funny story about that, there was a racer a little while back. His name was John Dowd, and he was from the East, and he was he kind of started in the sport late, and he raced into his 30s, into his 40s, early 40s as a pro, and I was talking to him one time. We were at a ride type deal, and we were talking, and one of his buddies was there with him and called him Horseshoe, and I'm like, how come that guy keeps calling you Horseshoe? And John, kind of had his head down, tried to change the subject, and I pressed it, and he goes, when I try to do a heel clicker, my heels don't click, so they're just out in front of the bars. He goes, I look like a horseshoe, I guess. That's what my buddies call me.
Junkyard Dowd, right? That
Yep.
guy's a legend. For
yeah,
sure.
He's awesome.
Yeah. So, okay. So let's take this now back to snowboarding a little bit. It seems like that motocross as a sport has got a long legacy and a long tradition and is very evolved. And snowboarding kind of has had this rapid rise with like it going to the Olympics and the X Games and everything. But yeah, it doesn't seem like it's still holding on to that momentum of growth. Is motocross still like growing every year?
Yeah, I think it is. I think what you see in motocross, and I can probably speak a little bit for snowboarding on this as well, is that, The sport really didn't come to the United States until the late '60s, which is basically only 10 years older than snowboarding, if you think of it. Mm-hmm. It had been run in Europe for a while longer than that, and it was kind of the kind of our birth of the sport kind of coincided with a movie called On Any Sunday, and so what you have now is you have guys that kind of that first wave that some of them are back racing the vintage class, but they've gone through a son and now have or a daughter in some cases and now have grandkids. And so it's this family thing, and so you've got generations now in the sport, and I think you're seeing that too in snowboarding more, and I think you're seeing too, dads bringing in youngsters that the guys that had started in the sport early. A lot of them had skateboarded and got into snowboarding. So that said, the sports I think are very parallel in what they've done with their heritage and where they're going with the future. Is snowboarding or motocross played out? No way. I mean, you just look at it. Look at slopestyle in the Olympics and look at what they're building. Look at what Red Bull's done and Monster have done with a lot of their video parts on that. And motocross, it's very similar. So it's the racing aspect of it never gets old. The freestyle kind of ebbs and tides a little bit. I mean, what more can you do now? I think they're up to at least 3, if not 4 flips, on some of those structured jumps. So, is it going to be 5 or 6? Whatever the number is. I mean, there's still, there's a lot of little technical things they do in freestyle, but with motocross racing, it's who's got the intestinal fortitude to hold it on the edge as fast as they can for 30 minutes plus 2 laps, and then take a little break and then do that again to see who's the winner. I mean, that's never going to get old. And and one of the things too about NASCAR, to bring that in is, and they're suffering right now. I don't know if you read that New York Times story about where the sport's at and where they think it's going, and what they're going to do with the ownership. But NASCAR, I think, lost a lot of its youth to sports like motocross, and kids. That's like a live video game you're playing, and when you go to a motocross event, and if you ride it, you're literally riding in a video game, and so the youth aspect of that, always the sport's gaining new fans. Where I think the round nature of NASCAR, and it showed at their gate, has suffered. Now that's not to say NASCAR isn't a badass sport. I happen to like it and think it's just incredible to watch in person. But the fact remains that they've lost a massive percentage of their crowd, where Supercross and motocross continue to gain.
Right. So why do you think that, like, the snowboard industry, the powers that be, if you will, have kind of ignored, say, the racing aspects of snowboarding, be it giant slalom or be it snowboard cross? Why do you think that, like, the snowboard industry hasn't really gotten behind the athletes and the people who participate in those segments of the sport?
That's an interesting question. I think with the what I'm closest to and have done competitively, the gate racing, is it's likened too much to skiing, and I still think that the industry likes a separation there. Border cross, I don't know why they wouldn't back it. That is a thoroughly exciting sport, and what they do with some of those courses that they build it's magical to see. What they do with the snowcats and the groomers and how they can create something to test the world's best as they do. At the 5-star events and obviously the X Games. So, man, to me, that's where it's at. I mean, slope style and half pipe are still, the kind of the torch carriers, but the thrill of that border cross events, that's the one I always tune into. So that's an interesting question. I honestly, I really don't have an answer. I don't know if it's it's a very specialized and they can't sell that many boards, or
Well, it's interesting because it's like we have what's called, like, say, a family cross track here at Sun Valley, and like that's like basically bank turns, rollers, that kind of thing. But I run my kids through that almost every run, and I'm trying to teach them how to pick a line around a bank turn, or how to either suck up or ollie off of a jump to try to make a double into a roller or whatever. And it seems like in terms of like the reality of riding, it's actually a lot of fun. And yet, like, there isn't specialized equipment made in America, and there isn't like, the guys who win Olympic medals in snowboard cross don't really get the same kind of sponsorship deals or love from the media even that like a freestyle rider gets just across the boards. Do you think that has to do with like videos and the importance of like video content?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, you don't really see a border cross part, but too, from the ski industry as well. I always like seeing AJ Kitt and Darren Rawls and some of those guys free skiing and big mountain skiing. So who's not to take Nate Holland and some of the top border cross racers, Baumgartner and those guys, and take them big mountain riding. I mean, I see enough on Nate's Facebook page. I mean, he has a blast out there. So it'd be nice to see Monster, go out with him and a couple of the other the guys, regardless of what sugar water back them, and see him do some big mountain riding, and some deep powder and that. But it is, it's some of that too, and it's like the freestyle motocross videos and the parts that you get in the top freestyle snowboard videos is that the progression it can be such a freak show, how big and do the guys that race, do they risk that? Do they risk then, having a bum knee or an ankle or, shoulder for the upcoming season, or, and if they're during their race season, their World Cup season, how can they find the time to split out to do that? And then do their sponsors want them potentially so banged up? So maybe it's going to come a time where we take the former border cross guys and get them together for a high speed video and then see what happens with that. And so.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like I see, like, if you look at the ratings, the half pipe and the border cross get the same ratings essentially on NBC. Yeah. And yet, 90%, 95% of the sponsorship dollars goes into the freestyle element, which is kind of an anomaly to me. I'm not sure why that exists, but I'm trying to figure that out, trying to dig down, and hopefully I can get some insight here by talking to you, because you're obviously come from a totally different perspective, Yeah, I'll have to ponder that a little bit, but it's you're right on with that, mate. Maybe as core and as in the know as the sponsors want to be, unless you're out there like you are and I am with our kids, and unless you have raced the Baker or certain other events and been there and seen that with some top freestyle guys that really groove on that style of riding, it's just going to take something to click, and maybe get a Hackinson or somebody like that to really push it and really pull a sponsor and do some of that style riding, and you got to film it really cool too. I mean, it's got to be just spot on, like what they do with the big mountain stuff.
Hey, what's up, Roger?
Nothing much.
Roger Sullivan. Mark Sullivan, 30 years earlier. Right?
Yeah.
What's going on? You loving snowboarding?
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah? What's the best thing about snowboarding?
Just like, it's a good experience, and it's really good to do with friends and stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's why we all got into snowboarding, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Okay. So what is the feeling you get when you're getting up in the morning and you're going to go snowboarding?
I get really excited. Sometimes I'm not too excited, though, because sometimes a little tired, but
Yeah.
it's always really fun in the end.
Does Mark pull you out of bed and go like, Roger, it's time to go snowboarding?
Yeah.
He does, huh? Because he's all stoked on snowboarding.
Yeah.
Full disclosure, how much does Mark love snowboarding?
He loves it, like, a lot.
Like a lot?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What's it like being his son? Is it hard? Do you have to compete with the snowboard sometimes?
Yeah, it can be kind of hard to keep up because he is pretty dang fast, but
Right.
yeah.
Right. So you guys race sometimes?
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. So have you donated to our Patreon?
No.
Why the heck not, Raj? Don't you have a job?
I guess I do have a job.
Yeah. What's your job?
I'm the mail guy for the snowboard project.
Wait, you're our mail guy?
Yeah.
Oh, well, at least you didn't get intern position because you'd be making me coffee, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that job sucks. Anyway, so you haven't chipped down a couple bucks?
Not yet, but I'm gonna.
Where do you
get
go?
some.
Where do we go to do that?
We go to patreon.com/the snowboard project.
Yeah. Thank you, Roger. If you didn't get that, patreon.com/the snowboard project. This is the voice of Mark Sullivan 30 years ago. Yeah, that's what he'd sound like.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about social media and the rise of social media. How has that affected what you do?
Well, it's part of what I do is I'm kind of a gatekeeper for as much as I hate it for the credentialing process and Bobby loves motocross.com thinks he needs a photo pass to be on the track with all the pro shooters, right? That and I'm sure it's somewhat similar in snowboarding and X Games access and that. So there's certain aspects of social media that are, and this was especially from the early days of it, that became a bit of a hassle. When you kind of branch everything out and involve everything now from obviously Instagram, the Facebooks, and Twitter to some extent. It basically what it does is it just reaffirms how cool the sport is and how you're going to meet your friends at the next race, right? What I do mainly is it's kind of the forgotten art in a sense. Is actually believe it or not placing the story in a mainstream publication. So that's social media just runs itself. It really does. You feed it in areas that you can, and then you sit back in some areas and just keep your fingers crossed that either what you did isn't going to blow up or how much of a black eye is the failed drug test from one of the riders going to affect the sport, and so so it's I don't know, at first it was a necessary evil. Now it's a great partner, and it's so cool to see. I'm an information junkie like many people, and it's so cool to see how stuff happens just so quick. When before it was kind of neat because you're on the inside and there'd be a little rumor and it'd kind of get kind of filtered out a little bit and hashed out the next day. It's all done now within everything happens and is done in 10 minutes.
Right. And it seems like that you don't really have too much say, whereas before you could kind of steer the people to the Rocco's Leap or whatever. Now it's like that's happening whether you have any say in that or not.
Yeah. And it used to be, when I was a Supercross back in the late 90s, it's when the sport, once social media really first was starting, you basically had like chat rooms and things like that were going on, and they they had a ban on cameras at the events, so you weren't allowed to bring any type of camera to event. Well, we had one guy that came in, and he came in with a laptop, and he literally broadcast a race live online, and this is in like '99, just to prove he could do it, and we sat down and talked about it. And I'm like, listen, we need this guy on our side, and it became the guy, was named Steve Bruin. He became the Factory Spectator, was his kind of call line online, and he really set the stage for how we dealt with at the time an online presence, and it's obviously since grown just exponentially since then, and in a way it's become a lot harder to control. Anybody right now with a cell phone is going to capture footage, and if you're at a live event and you shoot some footage of a guy having a bad accident and he gets twisted up really good, to the point where ambulance and head taped to a board and everything, and then you can literally sit there in the stadium and send that then to the local news station.
Yeah.
And even if you don't, and let's say they pull it offline, then then you run the risk, because these are, all these sports are, this isn't tennis, this stuff. There's a price to pay if you don't make a jump, and so the negative publicity of it is something the promoters are always concerned with. So, it's you fight those battles when you have to, I guess.
Right. So let's turn the page again to, it seems like you have a job that you actually genuinely enjoy, and you're not dreading showing up on Monday morning for work. Is that true?
Yeah. Yeah. It's, there's aspects of this that are just, sometimes you almost, you hate, it's kind of a cliche, but you got to kind of pinch yourself when you can't believe you're getting to do this, and, and write about it, and, and then stoke other people out on it. This, back to the, involving the pro snowboarders in motocross. I mean, like, I never got to meet Sean Palmer, right? I think I raced against him once at the U.S. Open, or saw him at the race, and but so those aspects of it, and the kind of the doors it's opened to me through through athletes, and I get to, when I'm in California, I get to skate doubles, half pipe doubles with Steve Cavallero. I mean, how does that rate?
Yeah.
So a lot of what motocross has done for me, I'm in awe of those guys, but I'm more of a skater and a snowboarder than a dirt bike rider, I think, and so the doors that's opened for me with this career has just been incredible. I'm really humbled by it.
So what kind of career advice do you have? Some kid, let's say he's in 8th grade and he's trying to figure out how he's gonna find a career that he really is going to, enjoy, instead of, like, let's say, working at Pizza Hut. What kind of advice would you have for a kid trying to find a path in life?
Well, listen to your teachers to start out. I mean, you sometimes, I was cocky in that, and back then, and you didn't, the authority and all that, but your teachers will have good stuff to say, and and you'll be able to kind of weed out, the stuff that's BS and the stuff that's helpful, and you just you stay on that, you stay on point with your studies, and try to be right in the meat of the curve like I did, and then once you get to school, you're gonna be at a crossroads. All right, do I take a year off and go film? Something that that, going back to that, your editing skills should be top notch. You should have a way with the King's English to make things interesting and tight and correct. And then you're going to come to a crossroads. If you feel you can make a living with it, you got to jump in with both feet. if not, then there's, and your parents are probably going to be, all in with finishing college, but always keep your finger on the pulse of, what's happening that you enjoy to do. And with snowboarding, I think one of the key things is, and with motocross is to volunteer as much as you can. Do stuff. Get paid with a couple beers or some food or whatever they're going to lay out for you, but bust your butt, volunteering. And what that's going to do is going to create a long line of references for you and contacts, and then you can continue to play those throughout your career when you look to parlay some cash into the effort. So, stay on it in school. Being the dad I am, right? Pay attention, obviously, to what you love. Your editing skills, especially video editing skills, need to be solid. If you choose to go like a sales rep route or that, college might not be a bad idea, because you're going to have to have some foundation business skills, and then volunteer your ass off. Just get in the middle of things. Do the menial stuff, hustle on it. Work for lift tickets, work for beer, work for food, and no cash, and live kind of hand to mouth for those first years, and then use those contacts that that were really pleased with the help that you gave, and use those contacts to further your career.
Cool. So final question. You've had a long career. You've been involved with skateboarding, with snowboarding, with motocross, and other sports as well. Tell me like your favorite story of this career.
Oh man, my favorite story. Oh,
could be your craziest story too. It could be anything.
All right. So I'm in Vegas, and it's the final, the Supercross finals. The year's I think around '99, and I'm in the show office, which is like in the in the annals of Sam Boyd Stadium in Vegas, where the race is being held. And I get a call. Hey, I'm so and so. I'm Vince Vaughn's agent. And I'm like, who's Vince Vaughn? He goes, don't you know him? You're so money, you don't even know it. And this is back before his big, and I obviously hadn't seen Swingers yet or wherever we was. So I'm like, I go to the gal next to me, Vince Vaughn? And she's like, Vince Vaughn, and everybody chimes in the office, Vince Vaughn, so it's a big buzz. I'm like, all right. So he goes, can you leave him some tickets and we'll call? And I go, no, you got to send him down here to get his own tickets. And I just hung up. Right, this happens. Funny, similar story with Charlie Sheen once, right? So anyway, I'm sitting there, and it's maybe an hour or two later. It's back when you had pagers, right? My pager's going off, my cell phone's ringing. I'm on a deadline on a story. My office phone's ringing. All this. All of a sudden, everything gets kind of silent, and I hear, "Hey, is Pat Schutte here?" And I'm like, I'll be right with you. He's behind my back, so I look right down the pager number. Hey, can I call you back on my cell phone? Blah blah blah. All this. Stop what I'm doing in the story. I turn around, and there's this, this tall, handsome guy over there, looking there. Everybody's quiet, just kind of looking at him. And I go up to shake his hand and walk right to the right of him, and put my arms around the guy with him, and just go. I went, Ralphie. So Vince Vaughn had showed up with Peter Billingsley, who was Ralphie in A Christmas Story. Yeah. And so Vince Vaughn thought that was the best thing ever, right? I didn't care less who Vince Vaughn was. Peter Billingsley was there, Ralphie from A Christmas Story.
Yeah.
So we hit it off, right? So they come and they watch the race, and we go out afterwards, and they're closing bars that we're drinking at, and Vince Vaughn's swooning the barmaid to keep them open, and me and Peter Billingsley are just knuckle dragging drunk. We are just, just you'll shoot your eye out, kid, and this, oh man, we're just having the best time, and Davey Coombs with Racer X was with us, and so we just had just awesome time. So that was I guess that was a fun story.
Wow, what a great story. What a great time. What a great career. Thank you, Pat Schutte. You are the man. Still.
All right, thanks, Mark. Look forward to seeing you soon, buddy.
Yeah, you too. Thanks again.
On behalf of Mark Sullivan and the Beeve, thanks for listening to the Snowboard Project. Remember, ride fast, take chances, dream big, and take action. And for God's sake, don't forget to support advertising-free snowboarding media at patreon.com. The Snowboard Project. The Snowboard Project. The Snowboard Project.